Here we go again with the eggs. I'm the Philosopher King 2.0. I talked about eggs quite a few months ago now. We'll put a link to that in the description. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there about whether or not they're actually trying to drive up the price of eggs or trying to take food off the market, create a food crisis of some kind. But I still maintain that the fault of the problem is not going to be Biden or Trump or anything like that, but simply the fact that we are deciding to have our eggs and chickens in general, and lots of other things I suppose too, in this mass market, almost factory style way of producing them. Now, obviously, the cost benefits of that are significant. I understand that. If you can get your eggs for $1 a dozen, which is pretty normal, you can do that pretty easily, or you could, right? Then if you are especially on a budget, tight budget, living paycheck to paycheck, $1 for your eggs makes a lot of sense. But the argument that I made before is that you're not really paying $1 for those eggs, especially in this environment. You're paying a higher amount, $3, $4, $5 per dozen, because you have to balance it out. If you balance it out, average it out over how much you pay for eggs over a year or 18 months or 2 years, you end up paying more. Because in this system, there's this periodic culling of millions of chickens, egg-laying chickens in particular, and that makes the price of eggs spike. So you have a temporary phase where you buy a dozen eggs today and a dozen eggs 6 months from now. So let's just say hypothetically, you only buy 2 dozen eggs per year, just to do the math. First time you pay $1 per dozen, and the next time you pay $10 for your dozen. Well, how much have you really paid for eggs? You've paid $5.50 for your dozen of eggs, actually. Now, I don't agree with this mass culling, and I'm going to come back around to that and talk about that. But this can be resolved in a free market way simply by having people go out of their way to support local farmers who almost always, not always, but almost always are going to produce their eggs in I hate to use the phrase, but in a more humane way. They're not going to pack their hens together in little crates and then put 10,000 of them in a warehouse or something. And you'll pay more for the eggs that you buy that way if you go out to the countryside or you incentivize somebody else to do that for you. And you might and probably will pay $3 or $4 per dozen eggs under that scenario. But according to the math that I just talked about, you're already doing that. It's just being averaged out over a longer period of time. So we could get rid of this whole spiking prices of eggs thing simply by supporting local farmers, which we ought to do anyway. So I made that argument before. I'm going to make it again. And of course, obviously, if you have your own flock of chickens, so much the better, right? That said, at some point, yes, okay, the consumer has the ultimate responsibility for the egg prices because of the way that they've incentivized the purchase of eggs. But there is obviously the problem of our public health officials just being stark raving mad. We are entrusting people to manage the, quote, bird flu crisis. The same people who are managing the egg crisis are the ones that locked everybody up into their homes, that required masks that don't even work, rushed vaccines to market that many people have questions about. The data out there is really scary about these COVID vaccines, and then wanted you to get like 30 million boosters. If they could have arranged it, they would have made you get 30 million boosters. And these are the very same people who, instead of encouraging people to have healthy lifestyles, strong immune systems through healthy food, just automatically, instinctively solve every problem by saying, here, have a vaccine. And instead of telling people that there are other kinds of lifestyle are intrinsically dangerous, they're not willing to say, hey, that's an unhealthy behavior. Instead, they say, here, have a condom, and you need to get on birth control. So they're cowards, they're stupid, they're ignorant, and they're arrogant. They're all these things. And somehow we are giving these people the ability and right to go out and cull millions of chickens for the bird flu. And why? Where is the malfunction in their brain? That's what I would like to know. These are people who supposedly believe in evolution, right? So the way to actually solve this, besides how I led this whole thing with the beginning with the consumers making better choices on how and where they buy their eggs, but from a macro level, the way that we would solve this, especially if you actually believed in evolution, is you'd let the bird flu come in. Sure, it'd be fatal. It would kill millions of those chickens, probably all on its own if you just let it go through. But the survivors would be immune. And lo and behold, within a couple years, the bird flu, which is supposedly very dangerous right now, is no longer dangerous at all because all the chickens have an immunity to it. That's how you solve it. And then you're done with it. So why don't they do that besides being stupid? Which is an entirely, don't get me wrong, entirely possible explanation.
You mentioned the inflation executive order the president signed, but egg prices have skyrocketed since President Trump took office. So what specifically is he doing to lower those costs for Americans?
Really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country. We also have seen the cost of everything, not just eggs. Bacon, groceries, gasoline have increased because of the inflationary policies of the last administration. As far as the egg shortage, what's also contributing to that is that the Biden administration and the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in this country, therefore a lack of egg supply, which is leading to the shortage. So I will leave you with this point. This is an example of why it's so incredibly important that the Senate moves swiftly to confirm all of President Trump's nominees, including his nominee for the United States Department of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, who is already speaking with Kevin Hassett, who's leading the economic team here at the White House, on how we can address the egg shortage in this country. As for costs, I laid out the plethora of ways that President Trump has addressed saving costs for the American people over the past week. He looks forward to continuing to doing that in the days ahead.
Well, this makes them feel important, right? They're really doing something, right? They're out there fighting the good cause, and they don't care who it hurts. They say that it's helping people, right? But they're actually just hurting people. But the important thing is they're in charge, they feel special, and they feel important. Conceivably, possibly, I'm trying to think here in a best case scenario. I mean, maybe some of them think, well, if we let it go through the chicken population and sort things out that way, maybe there'll be a chance of mutation in which it jumps to human if you have all those chickens. I'm pretty sure you could find a way to resolve that. Personally, that's not a deal breaker in my opinion. You can just manage the spread of the bird flu through the population and monitor it, and you could do it in a more deliberate way if you really wanted to. But these are people who are not very thoughtful, not as thoughtful as we might like. For some reason, we keep putting them in control of our lives. So at some point, the politicians need to just tell the public health people, you know what, your work is done. We're going to fire all of you and then slowly hire you back when you've gained some sensibility and some brain power and whatnot. So here we are again, dealing with the eggs, and really the whole economy suffers from similar kinds of things in the sense that you've got so-called experts running things, and the so-called experts are morons too. It's time to take back control of your own life and our own lives and our own communities. Buy local, support local, and call on your politicians to scale back the bureaucracies. I do have my own chickens, and I do have my own eggs, along with many other things that I produce for myself because we aim to be self-sufficient, and so should you. Follow me on X, YouTube, and find me on Telegram. I'm the Philosopher King 2.0. Thanks for listening.